Hi! So this week's reading was by Eisenstein, and he's pretty confusing. I probably didn't get all of the information that was in there, but I got the general gist of it, so I'm going to try and explain that, and hopefully it'll all be good. So Eisenstein's first main point is that all art is conflict, and this is for three main reasons. The first one is according to art's social mission, or why it's been produced. He argues that art's purpose is to show the struggles in society, and he says that all elements of art come together to show this to the audience, which I don't technically agree with, because some art is there just to show what a great place society is, or to show how pretty the hills look over there. It's not always about some big conflict in society that needs addressing. The second is according to its nature. He argues that all art is partly nature and what we can actually see, and partly human creativity, and if there's an imbalance of this, it moves away from being art into more technical material. For example, when you turn a landscape into a map, because there's a bit too much detail in there, and it's a bit true to real life. And the third is according to its methodology. Most filmmakers see films as a series of shots one after another, so you can see in sequence what's happening. But Eisenstein doesn't agree with this. He says that it's one on top of the other, and that replaces it coming down. He says that the shots create this idea of motion and an idea of tension, which is true, but I don't really see how he sees them as being on top of one another, when, if anything, they are one then another rather than being side by side or on top. They're just a new thing. He argues that to create tension in art, people use an interval in between each of the elements. Think, for an example, of music, where you use a rest, and this kind of creates tension because you don't know what's coming next. But he also argues that if this gap is too long, for example, if the rest lasts for far too many beats, you don't see this as tension anymore. And you do see this sometimes in art, where it stops becoming art, purely because you can't be bothered to wait for the change, or even know if there is going to be a change after the break. Focusing more on film, Eisenstein argues that film is more similar to language than it is a painting, and this is because language has different elements that build up more and more detail, and he says that the different shots in films do this, whereas a painting is just kind of there, and nothing can change. And he says because that films can change, it's a more coherent way of displaying a message or being able to say something to an audience than a still painting. But what about films that don't use dialogue and text? I mean, technically they are just a moving painting, so can they really be seen as closer to language? And from what I understand, he ends the piece by saying that there should be a new type of film that focuses more on feelings and concepts and ideas rather than telling a story by using different transitions, which I also don't particularly agree with. I mean, yes, it's good to have distinctions of different genres, but in effect, all films that are telling a story are still putting across messages and feelings. I don't think that there needs to be a different type altogether. So yeah, that's Eisenstein. I mean, it's pretty confusing to read at first, but once you start to wrap your head around what he's trying to say, he has some pretty interesting ideas. But yeah, that's all for now, and I will see you next week. Bye!